everyone is alright today. I'm your host, Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. This day has been pretty good, actually. I like the first two videos that I put out, even though I did one of those videos twice. I gave my patrons the first video, meaning the practice video. Oftentimes I do practice videos before I do this video. Let me say it this way. I do practice rounds before I do the video because I want an idea on where the stream is going to go. In this case, I've started to record some of them because sometimes the practice is better than the actual live version of the video. So in this case, one of the things I give to the patrons, I'm trying to find additional content to give to the patrons. Those one I give to the patrons. My wife and I also give a patron appreciation show at 1 p.m. on Sundays. That is done extraordinarily well. People seem to have enjoyed it and the banter that both of us have between each other. It's just the way we interact. Ms. Thomas is not feeling all that well, and she's been on a blue end because she hasn't felt well. And so this was giving me an opportunity to take care of Ms. Thomas in an odd way. And this is going away from the video for the moment for a tangent. I grew up for years on end being ill. That informs your perspective of the world. In addition to growing up for all the time being ill, meaning, when I was a kid, there was like a knee issue that plagued me until I was like 17, and then in which case it turned into a kidney issue. So it's an odd thing to be on the other side of that, taking care of somebody else. But by the same token, being ill gives a certain degree of patience in dealing with somebody else. It's almost like I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum taking care of her. So she's in good hands. The thing I want to talk about today, it seems like all of my videos today have had some degree of interest in the case dealing with Ilhan Omar. That is true. That was not necessarily intentional. It just kind of turned out to be that way based on the stories that were coming out today and my own tenor and my own perspective of this. The one thing that I want to kind of make point, though, is that Ilhan, and it's every bit as much as Ocasio-Cortez, even though Ocasio-Cortez gets more credit on the good side of this, meaning they give her the rah-rah, they give her the cheers, to say, oh, God, look at the socialists influencing the Democratic Party. Look at this new lead of Democrat. Look at these young Democrats. God, she's young. God, she's so attractive. And God, she's a socialist. We love her. The other catch to this, though, is the other coin to this. The Batman to the Superman is Ilhan. Ilhan has every bit as much pushed the Democratic Party in the direction that it needed to go, bringing up questions and conversations on the subject, however, in more uncomfortable terms, of Israel and the U.S. foreign policy with relation to Israel, and to some degree their policy or their ability to influence policy in the United States. The Democratic Party believed that it was going to be able to essentially scream Russia at the top of their lungs. Vladimir Putin attacked us. Vladimir Putin attacked democracy itself, the very meaning and the foundation of democracy itself. Now, this is somewhat lunacy. The United States instigate itself into the affairs of other nations all the time and have no issue with doing so. And no one screams at the height of their lungs that this is toppling democracy itself, this is destroying democracy itself, even though that is exactly what it was doing. But this is the argument that they screamed. But from outside looking in, it seems as the Democratic Party screamed this argument because they wanted to create, essentially, mind the gap between now and the next election, with this idea that they can fill the space with conversation and innuendo about Donald Trump and Russia while simultaneously ignoring the magnificent degree to which they failed, the mystically magnificent degree to which they failed, losing over 1,000 seats and losing the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the presidency to a reality show host that on the day he was elected, the majority of the country thought he was entirely unqualified for the job based on the polling that was taken on the day in which he was elected. There was no answer for this. In fact, the Russia thing has been a way to ignore dealing with why you failed so much. A, the fact that you failed so much, and accountability for the fact of that failure, but also why? Why? How did you lose to a blue-collar billionaire? This thought that bringing up Russia in this can create enough attrition damage on Donald Trump that can use Donald Trump as being somewhat of a linchpin in an argument that you got to put another Democrat back in that office regardless. No time to talk about our failures. And any talk about our failures hurts us in trying to get Donald Trump in office. Yes, all incentives in the world are there for them to make that argument, but they make that argument nonetheless. The catch of it is, though, when Sanders ran in the presidential primary, a bell was rung. Now it's true, as they broke Sanders' body and as Sanders lay dying, it sent out a call. And it just so happens that I said that Sanders, in that race, would make Democrats better liars. That is true. But I also said that there will be true believers. And there are some true believers that has heard the call and has ran from all these various corners of the United States. And the Democratic Party thought it was awesome to celebrate the multiculturalism that was associated with the party because it clings to identity politics like grim death. But the catch of identity politics is sometimes, I make the argument oftentimes that the issue is not race, it's class, because class in some degree supersedes this issue of identity. Just because Obama is black doesn't necessarily mean he's going to work to the interests of black issues. But people oftentimes make this mistake that just because a person has your skin color, that they're going to also have your common experience and your interests. In this case, you have somebody who does have a unique experience, who does bring an informed point of view from that unique experience into the political space. And they hate it, even though they absolutely need it, and is every bit as much as they need Ocasio to push the conversation to the left on issues of economics. Ocasio is challenging the orthodoxy of the party on issues of economics. Meaning, when she comes out, people have this odd thing of social pressure. There is, and you feel it, why aren't you racist? Well, you can say, well, I'm not racist because I just don't want to be racist. But why? At some point in this country, it was perfectly okay to be such. A social pressure, at some point applied generation after generation after generation, makes it somewhat of a hegemonic point of view that you are born into and that you accept just by virtue of growing into it as a cultural thing. This phenomena takes place also with things of other issues. It's not just, that issue. It could be anything. In our case, specifically with the Democratic Party, it's been on issues of economics, using identity in order to obfuscate from issues of economics, missing the fact that identity and economics to some degree are intertwined with one another since the founding of this nation. Ocasio-Cortez comes in and says there needs to be a high marginal tax rate. It needs to be 70%. Sanders, of course, made this point about made this other argument dealing with economics, but Ocasio became somewhat of a lightning rod for this. Now, initially, the lightning rod was, oh my God, can you believe this person is mentioning that the rich need to pay more? Then after a while, when they realized that the public was on board for it, they was like, it seems that the public is actually on board for this. Well, if you use identity in order to fill up the space in which people use to discuss things, to the degree that issues of economics is pushed to the sides, intentionally, by the way, then yeah, conversations like that, where the public itself agrees on, gets pushed to the wayside and gets ignored. Ocasio, one of her strong suits was that she brought this unapologetically into the limelight, even going so far as pushing for a Green New Deal and, to some degree, an overarching point of view of where that party should go. They should listen to her on that and not attack her for it, even though many of the corporate Democrats do attack her for it, even though they're trying to mimic her actions. Ilhan, to every degree, pushed the party in this regards also, but pushed the party in regards to the issue of Israel. Now, she's a Muslim, and in a weird space within the political spectrum in the United States, because I would say the country has a tendency towards Islamophobia in the way that they can attack her, but what she was saying, even though it was directly and specific to a lobby, gets magnified as anti-Semitic because they're making the argument that something is lurking in what she said, even though what she said was very specific. The attacks on her, however, have been pretty atrocious. In one case, somebody called her filthy. I mean, stuff is disgusting. On Fox News, they try to insinuate that her having a hijab meant that she was un-American. But the attacks in this case haven't just came from the Republican Party. It's also came from her own party. Her own party has been attacking her, calling her anti-Semitic, smearing her in this way in order to shut down the debate to which she's having. But this was somewhat of a jump of the shark. I'm not going to go through the entire case, but you already know it. Ilhan puts out a tweet with a disingenuous Republican who said, well, that tweet looks anti-Semitic. They asked for clarification. She says AIPAC. Now, her point was that AIPAC, like other lobbies, have an outsized influence in our political affairs. That is somewhat of a flat fact. AIPAC is a Jewish lobby, just like an oil and gas lobby, just like a healthcare lobby, just like a private prisons lobby, etc. Run the gambit. All of them pushing for the economic, for their own special benefits. In Israel's case, that benefit just so happens to be Israel. And just like other lobbies, they spend money in order to affect those aims. All of that is true. All of that is flat fact true. There's no, lurking behind the scenes in regards to subtext in the conversation she's having. She's being very specific to what she's saying. This was taken as anti-Semitic. It is utterly insane. It was taken that way by disingenuous people, and there are some useful idiots who come out and go with this perspective as if that perspective is legit. That perspective is not legit. She's not being anti-Semitic. There are some people down the line that may hear this and say she's anti-Semitic just because they heard everybody else saying that she was anti-Semitic, and they may be fearful of that stuff, but that's not a reality per se. That's their own reality that they're creating on this, being infused from other people who are completely disingenuous on this matter and know better. Me, as a lefty, can't accept the fact that they may feel some kind of way about this, because the reality of it, the more objective truth of it is, they were being disingenuous and smearing on this, and her perspective on this was straightforward and to the point, talking about the lobbies and the lobbies' influence in our political affairs. This provoked a backlash, a bipartisan backlash. However, the backlash was so over the top, it kind of proved a point. And not just proved a point, there were a few people, lefties, who pushed back against this backlash that would have killed the bill that they were going to use to condemn her on this. This is forcing a larger argument and conversation on the United States foreign policy with regards to Israel. This came because the smears were so over the top. They were so obnoxious, attacking her for a legitimate critique of the Israeli government and its policy within the United States and its policy in regards to Palestinians. A critique on the government is not anti-Semitic. It has nothing to do with the Jewishness of the lobby. It has everything to do with that it's a lobby. Flat fact. Just saying. Full stop. I guess the word I was looking for. Full stop. They may consider her irritant, but this conversation needs to take place. We give Israel billions of dollars. We've armed them to the teeth. They have nuclear weapons. And there's a basic question that needs to be answered on what happens. What is the end result of this? We've stood by them with a blank check, protecting them from war crimes, protecting them from breaking and flouting international law, and stealing and appropriating more land, and preventing people from coming back as refugees to their location. We have protected them in this. Israel doesn't want to allow them equal rights from the standpoint of voting, because from their perspective, that is no longer Israel. You're under their model, trying to destroy Israel if you're pushing for equal rights of Palestinian, in this case, one man, one woman, one vote. This is off the table. But also is off the table from the standpoint of, or an untenable position, the conditions to which Palestinians are living now. As more and more land gets appropriated, you don't have one or two state solution, because that's not available at this point. You don't want a one state solution. And to make my point more clear, this is what Palestine used to be. This is what it is now. These little green areas, these enclaves, these ghettos that they put human beings into. This is what it was. This is what it is now. Is it insane that somebody, Ilhan, who has an upbringing that's a Muslim, may have a different perspective of this, and that perspective is just as valid, maybe even more so, than the perspectives that have been pushed forth that have been, if I am being very honest, disingenuous in the way that she's been attacked. I'm just saying, my point is this conversation is needed. If we are looking to change the foreign policy of the United States with regards to the Middle East, if we are looking to change how Israel interacts with Palestinians, part of the issue that you need to deal with is Israeli lobbies and its influence in the United States. And our blank check that we give to Israel, because Israel has no incentive to change any of its policies as long as that blank check exists. She's doing God's work in forcing and provoking this conversation. The second part of this is a critique on Obama. Now, critiquing Obama, it's like, wow, that's shocking for somebody to be within the Democratic Party giving a critique like this. But her critique is on point, and again, hits directly on this issue of foreign policy. This is a political magazine. Now she's walked part of this back, so fair enough, because people flipped out in her comments. But once again, her comments, if I can find them, I could have swore I highlighted them, are dead on. Huh, maybe I didn't highlight them. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. Let's see, this. Oh, right here. So this is Political Magazine. I'll start up here because I want to give her origin. As the Somali population in her city continued to swell, so did young activist discontent. By the time she ran for office in 2016, knocking off a 22-term incumbent to win his seat in Minnesota State House, Omar was fed up not so much with Trumpism or the politics in general as with the Democratic Party. God damn it, I love that. Like, I am not alone. Understand what I mean? There are a lot of people who are like me, who used to be part of the Democratic Party and got fed up with this idea of this is what you say you are versus this is the reality of what you are. And we've had 8 years where we could see what you are versus the soaring rhetoric of hope and change. I love it. I love it. Let's keep going. As she saw it, the party ostensibly committed to progressive values had become complicit in perpetuating the status quo. Omar says the hope and change offered by Barack Obama was a mirage, recalling the caging of kids at the U.S.-Mexico border and the droning of countries around the world. And Obama watched. She argued that the Democratic president operated within the same fundamentally broken framework as his Republican successor. We can't only be upset with Trump. His policies are bad, but many of the people who came before him were bad policies also. They just were more polished than he was, Omar said. And that's not what we should be looking for anymore. We don't want anybody to get away with murder because they're polished. We want to recognize the actual policies that are behind the pretty face and the smile. Tell me she's wrong. Tell me she's wrong. What she's saying is absolutely correct. The critique of Obama in this case is dead on, especially with regards to foreign policy. You can go further. Libya. Obama was part of the key person in going after, let me start this. Thousands were murdered under Obama's watch. Thousands with these drone bombings. Thousands with these attacks. Many of these people being innocent civilians, meaning thousands of innocent civilians were killed by the policies that Obama took office. Not to mention Libya, where an entire country was destroyed. We flipped out when Iraq was destroyed. But out of the light of day, Obama was given all of this praise for Libya when that country became a war zone. They are selling slaves now with a policy that Obama greenlit. Not to mention the Yemen war. The New York Times recounts how Obama fundamentally greenlit the Yemen war, allowing the Saudis to go into the country and supporting the Saudis in doing this. You're talking about a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. That is a real humanitarian crisis. Yes, the legacy of Obama is fraught with one problem after the next from the foreign policy front. This doesn't even get into this idea of Syria and the undermining that country using CIA assets and supporting terrorists in that region of the globe in order to destroy the country from the standpoint of Bashar al-Assad, meaning another creating or provoking the civil war while simultaneously trying to get Bashar al-Assad out that office. And this is even after the complete and utter failure that was Libya. That's assuming it was a failure. The chaos itself may have made it breeding ground for their interests. My point is this. If the people, if groups, if people in this country are really looking to reform, to change the Democratic Party from what the Democratic Party is, what I suggest to you is creating idols of Obama or ideas that allowed the party to become what it is today is not the way to do it. Meaning lionizing Obama and his policies that were utter failures with regards to foreign policy, while simultaneously attacking Omar, is not the way to get to a different, fundamentally different party. Why create statues of people that had policies that were not necessarily on board with the things that you wanted to support? Ilhan is walking a difficult path. That is very true. But the path that she's walking is giving us an opportunity to support her in that path and to try to get, the foreign policy of itself with the United States in regards to Israel to change. To get that foreign policy to change by political pressure within this country itself, because Israel, to some degree, is supporting and maintained by the billions of dollars that they're given by the United States and by the blank check they're given by the United States to commit one crime after the next. We need to change our relation to Israel. And fact of the matter is, the conversation that Ilhan has provoked, just by virtue of who she is allowing us to have that conversation. Beforehand, you couldn't even have the conversation because it was just bipartisan support. The attacks on her have forced a conversation. It's time to have it. What do we want this party to look like within regards to Israel? My argument here is always that if you want anything to happen within the Democratic Party, you need to fundamentally change what that party is. And you can't change the party if you can't even have the very basic arguments. She's provoking an argument. She's doing God's work in the process of provoking that argument every bit as much as Ilhan. One is giving all the praise in the world, the glamour, the lights, etc., etc. And yes, I know they attack her and everything, but from the standpoint of the way she's perceived as just outright positive. Ilhan, not so much, even though what she's doing is just as important and just as vital. So, I want to give her a shout out, and she is definitely, from this channel standpoint, doing God's work. So, all right, I'm not going to keep this one long because this one has gone on longer than I really wanted this one to go. But I'll end this one here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all. And